Yo, guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. Today, I'm sitting down with Valerie Buhagiar, who is the writer and director of a phenomenal feature film that I got to watch a few months ago called Carmen. It's kind of this beautiful blend of rom-com and drama, and it sort of exists in this space of coming of age as well. And it's such a fantastic film. Valerie, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and chat about your film.
Hello, hello, and no problem. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm glad that you were able to slip away. Like you said, you're in the editing suite right now, and it looks like you might be hiding from everyone else right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I actually did just geek out.
yeah, but
Yeah.
so thank you, thank you, thank you. So before we even get into the film, I'm just curious how you got into filmmaking in the first place.
Wow. Yeah. I started off as a funny enough, I started off as a puppeteer and then went into acting and went to theater school and I wanted to do theater. And then I got some film work as an actor early on. And not too far long after I graduated from theater school, uh, well, no, acted in a feature film called Roadkill, a road
Okay.
movie, and then Highway 61. And during that time, I always writing in my journal, and there was a story that I wrote, a personal story that I thought, wow, that would be a good film or play. And I was kind of, it's easier for me to make it a play, a theater piece, but it was more cinematic. So
Mhm.
I went for it. I went for writing a screenplay, which I'd never done before, even though I've acted in many films and stuff by that point. Um, and it was a struggle. And I went, tried to get them funding for it and failed and failed. And then finally, the cinematographer I worked with, Rudolph Blacek, said, "I'll help you produce this," because he really liked the visuals. And I said, "Okay," and we got funding.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, and then we we made it, and the film did extremely well. It won Best Short in Chicago, and it was in MoMA and all sorts of places. And that's when, of course, people say, "What are you going to make next?" I'm like, "Oh shit, I've got to
Yeah,
put out."
yeah.
I just wanted to tell that story, and so I started writing and just made more and more. Um, that's what I did. But in between all that, I was acting, always acting in theater and
Mm,
film, television, whatever I could get, and making films. Yeah.
very
So
nice.
yeah,
Um,
thank you.
and so you use the phrase. Someone said, "Well, what are you going to do next?" And I always thought of that as a compliment. This was
Mm.
so good. I can't wait to see what you do next, kind of thing. And then in the film that came out last year, late last year, Tick Tick Boom, um, the Jonathan Larson is said, "What are you gonna do next?" And it's sort of like a slap in the face, like this isn't quite good enough. What are you going to do next? How do you receive that line? Like when someone says to you, "Well, what are you gonna do next?" Does it seem negative to you, or does it seem positive to you?
That's a really good question. I think it's a combo of positivity. I think it's a
Mm,
positive question. It's like, wow, yes, what are you going to do next? This is great. What's going to happen? Where are you going to take us?
yeah.
But it brings in this anxiety of like, well, what if that was a fluke? What
Okay.
if that, that was just a lucky chance that you like that one? Like, yeah, you know, and you hear these stories, right? It's the first film could be brilliant, and then the second one's like, or whatever. It just goes like that. But you
Right.
can't think that way. You just keep diving in, and then what happens? Tell the producers. But what happens is you have a bit of a hit and then more money comes your way, but also with that, to make more films, we
Hmm.
hope, is comes more producers, and more
Okay.
producers means more say from other people. And I
Yeah.
think what happens is you lose your sensibility and the story you want to tell. I always question, like a lot of people say, oh, so and so's second, third, whatever film really sucked compared to their first. And I'm like, wonder how that happened. I
Yeah.
always wonder, how did that happen? Because that's not that it's a funky business.
Yeah.
You know, we need these people to support us and give us that funding and support our vision.
Hmm.
But so many of them have a say.
Yeah.
I think it's rare to find a producer. I don't know. I feel kind of new at it, even though I'm old. It's just like somebody just like, here, go and play. Go and play.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, to trust you. Like what's it mean to give support? You know, or I've heard many times oh, we've got your back. I'm like, really? Really? You've got, what does that mean to have my back? I think it means to really have someone's back is to really support them, to give them that safety net to play. And I mean, that's what I do for my actors,
Yeah.
my crew, you know, it's like, this is my vision. This is what I like to see. These kind of, you know, look at these paintings. This is what I'm looking at when I think of this scene. And then they interpret that, and we collaborate in that way. And I'm hoping it'd be nice to have a producing team that does that too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about the process by which you're finding these people that you trust so much to bring your vision to life and not their vision so much. And
Yeah.
that's a very, I've never heard someone describe it the way that you just did, um, where you expect them to have your back, but that means to support my vision, not to come in and change it to make it yours. And
Yeah.
I think that's a very difficult thing because it's a, I mean, I'm not fully immersed in the business. I'm in a very different part of the filmmaking business. Um, but I imagine that you have a lot of people that are there and they want their vision on screen, no matter what it takes, even if it means stepping on toes, even if it means altering what that initial vision may have been. Even if your vision, even if that vision isn't as good as what the original thing is, I imagine that you have people that are in there, even if they don't mean to be negative or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but they're not trying to cause these negative effects on the film. But I think that with all that input, like you said, you sometimes it's just part of the business. It's like too many cooks in the kitchen almost.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think to resolve that is as much transparency as possible from the
Yeah.
set. You know, the first time you meet, it's like, what kind of film? First of all, what sort of films do you like? What sort of
Do I?
films, you know, like, no, like, not you. Oh,
Yeah.
I'd love to know
Okay.
what you like.
Okay. Yeah.
But like when you're talking to producers and stuff, what sort of films do you like? And so why do you like this
Yeah.
one? And where do you see this playing? And all these kind of ideas, you know, like, let's get that out on day one.
Yeah.
Because what eventually happens, it's like someone takes, I hate this metaphor, but I will use it. It's like your baby, and they give your baby a new name, a new hairstyle,
Okay.
change the wardrobe, that kind of thing. That's what happens when,
Yeah.
you know, when you take something like, you know, I wrote the script, and you spend a lot of time writing it, and then someone wants to change everything.
Right.
That's and it doesn't work. The dishonesty comes through, I
Yeah.
feel, in a bad way. Yeah. Anyway,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So what kind of films
Um.
do you like?
Um. So,
good, good
so
ones.
that, yeah. So that's ooh. So I like all kinds of films. I wasn't prepared to answer that question yet. I usually save that to the end. So I like to save that to the end and then ask whoever I'm speaking to because it always throws them off. And you got me. So uh,
Yeah.
I like a little bit of everything. There's no genre that I completely stay away from. I would say that musicals are probably my least favorite, so I've stayed away from them for the most part. I've appreciated
Right.
them more in the past few years. My wife is really big into musicals, so I've been semi-forced to watch them. Um,
Right.
but I've always liked the kind of sci-fi things. I've like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, fantasy stuff, and Harry Potter, and now I'm really big into Marvel. but I like these indie films that are able to dive right into the emotion. You don't need all these massive spectacles to appreciate the story, because I think Marvel loses a lot of its luster if you don't have all these epic CGI fight scenes and things like that. So
Yeah, yeah,
I like these low budget films where people just pour their heart and souls into them. These dramas, um, even some of these low budget sci-fi films, because with what little they have at their disposal, it's nice to see what they're able to create anyway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but as you can see behind me, there's a million things. So
I know. Yeah.
um, so I'll just jump right into it. So what are some of your favorite films? I'll ask you now instead of waiting until the end.
Oh, wow. There's so many. Like for a while there, I was a huge, and I still am, but I, don't focus on them as much. Cassavetes, but that could be because he does theater and film, and that,
Okay.
and the story, Jenna Rollins and the actors, it's very actory stuff. And
Hmm.
so back in the day, I was a huge fan, and because I do both, right? I do theater and I do film and I do write for both. Not as much in theater, but yeah. So I love that stuff. I love, I do love the older Italian Fellini. I'm
Hmm.
very Fellini-esque and um, yeah, Cinema Paradiso. Like I have to say, I'm a schmaltz for that kind of stuff as well. But then I
Okay.
like the kind of like the John Malkoviches and that world
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a bit like you. I don't, except for like I'm not big on the sci-fi. I need to
Okay.
feel um I need to feel mm, the human struggle and
Mm.
and journey. And it's difficult. I find it's usually difficult to feel that in sci-fi. So
Okay.
it's got to be really special, which I'm sure there is a
Yeah.
sci-fi movie that I've seen that I was like, oh my God, that's so great that because you do get the human quality. I love people and
Yeah.
I love seeing them work through stuff. Uh, you know, it could be funny, it could be sad.
Hmm.
And I do love the layers of uh, mixing I don't know how to say this so much, but drama, comedy in the sense, and you might have seen that a bit in Carmen. It's like
Hmm.
we're always sitting on the cusp, or at least I am. I'm always sitting on that cusp of like, oh my God, I'm bawling my eyes out, but this is fucking ridiculous, and I burst into laughter. And it's I think it's the human. I do think that's very human of us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but you go to funerals and people burst into laughter, and it's a
Hmm.
nervous energy. And yeah, I've always felt that tears and laughter sit on the same nerve. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just babbling right now, but
No,
basically,
no, you're fine.
I like the human spirit and and that journey is what I like. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the blend of genres in Carmen, and I mentioned that a little at the start. Um,
Yeah.
and so, how did you come up with this idea for Carmen, and how did you decide? I know that you said you're very fond of films that blend genres that way, but how did you decide that this was the film that you were going to make, and that you were able to blend the genres the way you did?
Well, first of all, I am originally from Malta, and then we immigrated, and I grew up in Toronto. But
Okay.
most of my family is in Malta still, and so I've gone there and back and forth to visit. And this one year, I went back and to visit, and a cousin of mine took me to visit my aunt Rita. I've never really quite knew what her story was. She always dressed in black. She was very pious, never had a family of her own. And she didn't speak a word of English. Most Maltese do because of the British Commonwealth and that sort of thing. But anyways, my cousin explained to me that there was a tradition in Malta that when a man became a priest, which most households had a son who became a priest.
Okay.
So it's very Catholic there. His sister would go with him and be his maid, and she would not get a salary, an education, or a family of her own. And my Aunt Rita did that at the age of 13.
Wow.
She went off to help my great uncle. He was a Monsignor, and then went off to help my uncle, who was a parish priest. And that was her life. And then they died. And then she was taken in by the family. I think someone took her in, and that's it. And now she's she's like 90, I think 95 or 96, in a home in Malta. Okay. And then, I came back to Toronto after hearing that story and told a few friends. A friend who's, family's from Ireland said, "Oh yeah, that happens there." And a friend in India said, "Oh yes, but what we do here is the eldest has to stay and take care of the grandparents." And it's like, oh my God, this happens a lot where the eldest female has to sacrifice her life for the family or the church. And so that's when I dove into it. Now, I think this happened with my first feature as well, the anniversary, where I start off with a drama, but I just can't take anything I do seriously. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing.
It's like, like life is, yeah. So I don't like to dwell on pain. And also with being respectful to the story and human spirit. But so I believe I probably started with the drama, and then I just happened to bring in my humor, like the pigeons, for instance, in this film. People ask me where that idea came. I have no idea. I just sit at my kitchen table and I put everything out there, and then I justify. Afterwards, I'll justify. Okay. And so the pigeons to me represent Ahmad.
Okay.
Ahmad guiding her throughout.
Very cool.
I don't know if your listeners, if they haven't seen the film, they don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, but I bring in surreal elements a lot into my films. I love that world. I think it's most cinematic when you have, just magic realism coming in there. I love books by Isabel Allende and Garcia Marquez. That world excites me. So that's part of it. And then I do like the gravitas that comes with this true story, true journey, true pain, topics that are huge, like racism has always been something that just doesn't make sense to me. And sexism and homophobia, all these things that I just feel need to be addressed and keep work through. So that brings a gravitas to the piece, and then human nature's the comedic side of it. That's the comedy that comes in. It's like, yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. You gave me a very thorough explanation of where that came from and how it came to be. So you mentioned that transition, how you transitioned from drama to comedy. But there was two other transitions that I noticed throughout that I was really a fan of. The one big one is the color transition between the first and the second half. There's obviously a huge change in that. And then there's a change in Carmen's aesthetic as well. So you can answer in any order you like, but I'm curious, one, what was that makeup and hair regimen like for Natascha? Because I imagine she's a beautiful woman, and you make her look, for lack of a better term, quite homely in the first half of the film. And then the colors, they change so drastically between the first and second half as you sort of uh, transition into that more comedic aspect of it. So again, what was that regiment like for the hair and the makeup? And then what why did you choose the color transition the way you did? Why did you choose it at that moment? What how were you able to blend that with the narrative?
Yeah. Thanks for actually noticing the color shifts and stuff. That's a really
Yeah,
important
yeah.
element to the storytelling. And for me, it was so in the beginning of the film, it's very monochrome. You know, nobody really their true spirit isn't seen. She the color shifts once she speaks in the confessional booth. When she
Hmm.
finds her true voice, her true calling,
Yeah.
everything starts to shift. So we went from monochrome with the wardrobe to more colors. There are more flowers in the frame. Um, we used an anamorphic lens.
Okay.
Just everything just shifts that way. And so I came with that decision pretty early on and then told my entire team, my production designer, my wardrobe, makeup, hair, everybody. So everyone in the film, the entire village gets dressed differently and their makeup's different, their hair's different, and then also the design, the like flowers in the frame and stuff like
So
that.
cool.
And it's all because of her voice.
Hmm.
So it's she everything around her follows her inner spirit.
Hmm.
That's where that came from. And then as far as well, it was interesting. I'll go back first when I first was introduced to Natascha, and we spoke on the phone. And she read the script; she really liked it, and I loved seeing her work, and you know she's so solid. And I did say to her, my only challenge with you is that you're too beautiful for this role. And how do I make someone so beautiful invisible to the village?
Okay.
Because she's supposed to be invisible. And like,
Yeah.
now, sure, we can change your hair color and, um, makeup and stuff. But then I talked about the physicality.
Hmm.
Uh, Beauty's a weird thing, right? It's a weird thing. And it's like you could have the best architecture going on here,
Hmm.
but if you don't feel it, if you're not shining that light behind it, meaning your inner spirit, it's not going to shine. It's not going to be
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we were talking about. And it helps being an actor in the sense of like your solar plex is caved in. You
Hmm.
shuffle your feet. You don't you don't care anymore. You're
Yeah.
not seen. You don't feel it. And with the beauty about not being seen is that you see.
Yeah.
You can see more. So anyway, she and I talked a lot about that, and we were on the same page. And then of course the wig, the which and then coloring her hair because she's blonde. So we went for brown, which is more in line with being Maltese. Not that there aren't any Maltese blondes, but they're rare. Things like that, right? Now that it was difficult as far as on set, like putting on a wig and taking the wig off. It takes work, and then changing
Yeah.
her makeup, that kind of thing, takes a lot of time and work. And then we had to curl her hair and things like that. But also, it was extremely hot. It was like 42
Okay.
degrees. So to wear a wig and that thick black dress and the tights and that sort of thing was
Hmm.
probably very, very challenging. But she was a great trooper, and she amazing, amazing, amazing to work with. Wow, wow, wow. I feel so blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she
Yeah.
really was fantastic. I mentioned her physical beauty, but she is really a beautiful actor as well. She did such a
Yeah.
fantastic job. So
Yeah.
I don't want to downplay that at all because she did such a wonderful job. Um, and then one of the things that stood out to me throughout the film was that relationship between Carmen and Paolo. It's a very unique relationship. It's maybe a little taboo to many. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you create that relationship in a way that doesn't step over the line and it still remains acceptable to those that are watching.
Yeah. I never even thought of that. But it's this, first of all, sure, like Natascha's playing a 50-year-old woman. I think Natascha is 50, but she doesn't look it, right? Natascha can
Right.
pass for, I don't know. I don't know age well, but like what people are supposed to look like, but maybe 35 or something. They didn't look too far apart
Hmm.
in age until you see him with someone his own age.
Yeah.
The girl on the motorcycle, and you go, oh
Right.
shit, she does look older. Like that always happens. So
Yeah.
that's hence why I put that in there. But he takes a sincere interest in her. She's curious
Hmm.
because no one shows up with all that stuff, and he
Yeah.
sees he's a little more worldly, and he sees something in her that's really interesting and luring. Um, and I wanted to just play with that idea of someone who's now not been seen in so
Hmm.
long, 35 years to be exact,
Yeah.
and then is by someone so much younger, and what it does to you, and how her innocence, what it does to her innocence.
Hmm.
You know, so the taboo, I don't think there is a taboo. Like, I mean, let's face it. Come on, how many films have men in their, I don't know, 50s, 60s hanging
Right.
out with 20-year-olds, right? And so it's like,
Hmm.
whoa, now we've got like an older woman with a younger guy. Like, who gives a shit? Like what's the problem here? Sorry, what is the problem? Um, it's just, I guess maybe the problem is that we're not accustomed to it. Is
Yeah.
that it? Is that it?
I think that's what it
Yeah,
is. Yeah, because I think it's the same thing where you said you were always perplexed and you couldn't wrap your head around racism and homophobia and things like that. Not that it's
yeah,
wrong, it's just something, for some reason someone has an issue with it. And I think while the older man and the younger woman has become more mainstream, that relationship has never been flipped on its head. Not that it's never been flipped on its head, but not as often flipped on its
yeah,
head. So that's why it appears so unique and so different.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wonder if I'm just thinking this now, like if she wasn't such an innocent, if that relationship could have blossomed, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. But then there's a whole thing about like some people on set, like actually a couple of men on set said, whoa, Paolo's such an asshole. And I'm like, no, he's not. And Natascha was saying the same. He's not an asshole. He's just living. Like he's just
Right.
being. He's a tourist kind of. Like, I mean, I know he lives in Malta, but
Hmm.
it's like there isn't any commitment. He's someone who doesn't, and he doesn't realize her innocence and how that might hurt her.
Yeah.
He wasn't out to be nasty at all.
Right.
It's just her innocence that took it all wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
Um, and then so I guess my big question was, so again we talked about all these blendings, the blending of all the different genres and things like that, and in a lot of ways, to someone who doesn't know the full story, who hasn't seen the full film, that seems like a pretty saturated place in cinema now. These
hmm,
these rom-coms mixed with drama, and at the center of it you have this woman that ultimately perseveres in life, and um but you find yourself in a place that's different enough to exist in that space and can and interest in a new audience, or continue to bring people in without people going, this has been done before, I don't want to watch this again. How do you separate yourself enough the way that you did, so that you, while you still exist in that space that you want to exist in, you've created something new?
yeah. I I don't know. I don't know, but the you tell your truth, right? Like
Yeah.
you tell your truth, and this is Maltese. My truth is Maltese Canadian. I'm
Yeah.
a Maltese Canadian woman. whose heart has been broken a zillion times and who's fallen in love a zillion times
Hmm.
and still figuring it out. And then bringing in the church. And it's all about trying every pass at a script, a draft of the script is about getting closer to the truth. You
Okay.
know, I mean, yeah. And I think that's what makes it unique. Like you tell
Hmm.
your story, not like a bad photocopy of whatever,
Yeah.
Love Actually or something like that. Like, like tell your story, and get closer to the truth as possible. And I think what's a problem is people are trying to make what's the latest hit.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say producers are pushing for. But by the time your film gets made, that's that latest hit is dated and it's
Yeah.
not yours. And that's what we want to hear. And you'd be surprised how not unique your voice is, which means that it vibrates in other people. Your
Yeah.
story will vibrate in others. And that's what we aim to do. And that's what I aim to do. I mean, that's what I aim to do as a human being, to try to get to the to the to tell my truth. Like, it's like it's probably the hardest thing is, am I being honest? Like, am I being honest right now? Like, I don't know. Am I? Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
That's how I live my life. You wonder how I get out of bed.
Yeah.
Should I get
And
out
I,
of bed? Maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe I don't really feel like getting out of
right.
bed.
But
Yeah.
if you go back to one of your earliest statements, you said you can't be worried about what everybody else thinks. You can't always be worried about, well, this will this next one be as good as the last one? And I think ultimately it comes down to that. You can't always, while obviously you want the film to be successful and you want people to appreciate what you're saying, like you said, you're just telling the story that you want to tell. And
Yeah.
if 10 people like it, great. If 10 million people like it, great. And I think that's one of the reasons I like these indie films so much, because I don't think they expect to reach the masses, and they just want their story to be told and they want someone to hear it. And that sounds, if I'm not mistaken, kind of what you're saying, that you just want your story to be heard. And I think it is, and I think it comes to life very well.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
Thanks. Yeah.
And and with that being said, where can other people watch Carmen?
Right. That's where I need a producer. I guess if you just Google Carmen and then various streamers, I'm not really sure where it's on iTunes or what,
Okay.
but I'm so sorry I don't have the
No,
direct answer to that. Yeah. I
that's
mean,
all right.
especially in America. I know in Canada it's in various places, but I don't know
Okay.
where it is in America. Yeah.
I'll do a little bit of research and I'll make sure it's in the in the description so people can find it, because
Thank you.
I hope they watch it.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks.
and then this wouldn't have been my final question, but we jumped right into our favorite films and stuff like that. So my final question is, and I think you're working on something, because you're, like you said, you're in the editing studio. I'm curious what you're
Yeah.
working on right now.
Well, this is the first time I've been hired as a director on a project, and
Okay.
I didn't write it. So, director for hire, called The Dogs. It's based on a novel, an award-winning novel called The Dogs by Alan Stratton, a Canadian novelist and playwright. And it's a psychological thriller.
Oh,
So we
very cool.
shot it in Northern Ontario, October, November, and now I'm editing. Yeah,
So
it's
cool.
got everything in it. Yeah, it's great. It's a great script, great actors. So that's what I'm doing there, and then I'm writing. And you're gonna regret saying what you said, but I'm writing a musical.
Oh no.
Yes, it's a jukebox musical comedy called Still Kicking.
Well, see, this is why I would have asked that question at the end. So you have already said that, and I could have just pretended like I love musicals.
Yeah, but I've got that going and a few other things in the works, but yeah, we'll see where everything unfolds. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, I will even watch the musical when it comes out if I'm given the opportunity. Uh,
Okay.
but I look forward to seeing all the things that you're working on. And again, thank you for making such a fantastic film. Thank you for taking some time to sit down and chat about the film. And I hope that I can spread some awareness on it and have a few people watch it as a result of this.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank
Of
you.
course.
All right.
Well, again, thank you so much, and you have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.